Well, good morning. My name is Jeff Raker. I have gathered two incredible coaches, friends for many years, influential in my life. We are talking today about the changes coming to NCAA sports, specifically swimming, since we all have our feet in that realm. You see a couple of pools, and you see an approaching storm in Columbia, South Carolina, as well. So if the trees start to go sideways on McGee, we might lose him. Let us offer a couple of introductions. For me, my resume is kind of it's very eclectic. Collegiate swimmer, pastor for 35 years, FINA starter from 2011 to 2018, master swimmer, and a certified executive leadership coach. So I've been coaching and leading people for over 3 decades, and the last 5.5 years full time working with business leaders, sports coaches, teams, and individual athletes. So from Toyota to the Department of Energy to Auburn swimming and diving, Notre Dame, SMU, Queens, Gardner-Webb, a host of other collegiate teams. And it all started with my home club, the Mason Manta Rays here in Mason, Ohio. We're a little pumped for Carson Foster and his success in Paris. So let me just flip it over to Mike, coming to us from Auburn, Alabama. Give us your brief rundown.
It is not windy today. We'll make sure McGee battens down the hatches. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, coached club for almost 20 years, decided to go into the college ranks. I coached mid-major D2/D1 at a school that made a transition. Gardner-Webb was there for almost 20. McGee was kind enough to let me come to Columbia, South Carolina for 3 years, where we worked together, and then I've been at Auburn for 3 years. So not as quite as eclectic background, but I did work for a Fellowship of Christian Athletes somewhere in the middle of there for I think 4 years. So a little eclectic, but not quite as much.
Outstanding. McGee?
A little bit, kind of a diverse career. I had a 25-year coaching career. I grew up as a swimmer. Went to college at East Carolina University, swam for Rick Kobe there. Started my coaching career at East Carolina. Had a 4-year stint in the military and coached at the United States Naval Academy with the men's program there. Was the head coach at the College of William and Mary. And then for the last 14 years of my career, I was the head coach at the University of South Carolina. And had the opportunity there where Mike said it, I was nice enough to allow him. I viewed it an entirely different way. I viewed it as a quite one of the best recruiting wins I ever had was being able to get Mike Simpson to come join our staff at South Carolina. Transitioned out of college coaching in 2021, and I'm now doing a different type of coaching. I'm a financial advisor here at Cornerstone Financial, and Mike is now a client of mine, which is kind of awesome. So we still get to talk and cut up a lot, but still coach my daughter's high school team at Gray Collegiate Academy. So that still continues to scratch any coaching itch that I might have and keeps me attached to the swimming world. But yeah, so it's a very different travel path to land on this Zoom call, but a good one nonetheless.
Awesome. Well, and we were talking before. Look at the representation. You have a present collegiate coach. You have a parent of a rising junior, sophomore. Yep. Who has a lot of that interest in swimming in college. And you have me who works with a lot of coaches and athletes, both high school and college. And the landscape of NCAA sports is changing. There's so much we could talk about, but that's really our topic. And the changes in the collegiate Olympic sports is going to trickle down to impact the club sports in some ways. I'm not even sure we can go there because that's kind of into the future a bit. But in a sense, the question is, what is a collegiate coach to do in the midst of this? How does a coach lead, starting with themselves during uncertain times? Athletes are wondering what's happening. We just discussed a collegiate program that cut a rising sophomore who is blazing fast, but just doesn't fit in what looks like is going to be maybe a 30 men, 30 women kind of combination that swimming's gonna deal with. It may impact the Power Four way more than it will mid-major and below. Division II, Division III may not see as much of an impact at all, and yet they may actually benefit from some things is part of the conversation. We're not going to get into that because we don't have time, because we don't know answers. But in the midst of all this, what does a coach do? Because I'm talking to coaches, you all are talking to coaches, and McGee, you kind of dovetail into all this with working with some NIL stuff with people, and so yeah, we're all involved in these conversations with coaches, and some coaches are paralyzed right now. It's just I don't have answers. I don't know what to do, and it paralyzes them. Well, that's not good. And for others, it's like everything's on fire. and everything is a huge deal. Well, that's not good either. So much depends on the person of the coach. I don't think we need more workouts to share. I don't think we need more thoughts on training approaches. We need leaders who will set the tone, show up consistently, inspire their athletes and their staff. But in the midst of uncertainty, how do you lead? That's really where my niche is. How do I lead? How do I lead? Because it's not the skills of making swimmers swim faster that's going to trip up a coach. It's going to be how they lead. And that's a lot determined on how they show up. So let me start with this. It's the summary of a study from the Canadian Olympic Committee. They created a group called Own the Podium back in either 06 or 08. They wanted to get more Canadians on the podium, Winter and Summer Olympics. They found 5 things that made the difference. 2 of them are federation funding, so not relevant to this conversation. But here were the other 3. Athlete self-awareness, positive coach-athlete relationship, and optimal training environment, which for swimming has very little to do with the actual tank, natatorium. It's really culture, and that starts at the top. And if coaches are going to lead, well, these are 3 pillars that never change. In the midst of everything changing, these never change. How do the 2 of you see these 3 from your experience and from where you sit now and what coaches can do?
So a few years ago, I had one of the head Olympic coaches talk to my college team back in the day, and I said, what's 1 or 2 things that you learned from being the head coach? And he said, number 1, without a doubt, the best kids, the kids who succeeded the most, the kids who medaled, the kids who stepped up, were the kids who had the best communication and the best relationship with their coach, bar none. He goes, it was clear across the board who had a great relationship with their home coach, whoever that was, whether it was a club or college, or they did not. And he goes, it was very, very clear cut. And across the board, those kids were by far the most successful. So I think that piece in the middle is huge. Yeah.
Mike, I agree 100% with you. I think when you look at that middle column right there, the positive coach athlete relationship, I think part of a coach's job is to help an athlete become more self-aware and guide them to that point of understanding of who they are, not only in the pool, but who they are outside the pool. And that, you know, that swimming is just a piece of who they are. It doesn't necessarily define them. And then that relationship of an athlete being able to trust that a coach is always looking out for their best interest and always understanding them for them being a person and not just a time, I think is a huge thing. There's so many things about the third column, honestly, that are out of all of our control. We can create the best training environment, but sometimes the resources each school has is a little different, so that environment looks differently. And I think the one thing that is controllable in there is how that coach steps into that coach athlete relationship and how they approach that part of it.
So yeah, those are great insights. So many coaches get caught up in the performance and forget the relationship. And what I've found over the years is if an athlete trusts their coach, they perform better. Plain and simple. And that trust, well, the coach has to show up consistently. If the athletes don't know what they're getting each day, that relationship's not going to be positive. They're not going to trust them. And how does that work in the midst of? I mean, we talked about a coach that, you know, and let's just pick a day, on a Monday, had a meeting. Here's the information, move forward, do this. And the next Monday, it was almost a complete 180. Well, how do you show up consistently when that's happening?
Well, and I think going back to that illustration that you had up there, the first one says athlete self-awareness. I think you can put in the case of this conversation, coach self-awareness is vitally important to help with that relationship with athletes, but also to help us as coaches to be able to manage this ever-changing world. Every day, we're not sure at this point what we're looking at. And like you said, you talked to a guy who 1 week was told one thing, 7 days later he was told something completely different, and his head's spinning like, what's going to look like next Monday? Who knows?
And the coach has to know the triggers for themselves. What triggers them? You know, I know I've worked one-on-one with both of you, and you know that trigger question. It's like, okay, well, what led to that response? Does the coach know? And if so much is uncertain in a coach's life right now in their job, well, how do they respond to that? What do they do? How are they perceived? I mean, this is the kind of work that actually lays the foundation for consistency. And yet, I had a coach, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be within 10 miles of your university, working with another university. I'd love to be a part of this conversation. And the coach looked at me and said, I don't have time for another meeting. How do you see that from your experience? Because it is hard to see, how do I fit something in? And yet, what would you say to that?
I think constantly taking a step back and saying, what are the most important things that I need to do right now? What are the priorities? I kind of chuckle at that response from that person. I can see it, but at the same time, I'm going, of all the meetings that you've had, to have a meeting to discuss this, you're going to say that that's a low priority. I'm going to say that that should be at the top, and everything else is less.
Jeff, one of the things that I felt through working with you was you helped me bring order to my coaching process. And what I hear when I hear this story about a coach saying, I don't have time for another meeting, what that tells me is there's chaos going on everywhere around that singular meeting. And if they only realize that the one meeting that could slow everything else down is far more important than it's not just another meeting. Because look, you and I both know there's a lot of meetings that go on in college coaching. We spend most of our days in meetings.
Yep.
And I'm with Mike. I understand that statement. But what that tells me is that coach's life around right now is spinning. It's spinning out of control with very little organization and very little order because they don't know how to fit anything else in. And to me, when the coaches have to realize when you feel like you don't have time to do anything additional, something like this is probably the key to creating more time around that. If that makes sense. I don't know if that statement makes sense.
I mean, you got to have, there are plenty of coaches we both know that work on themselves. And there's also a whole lot of coaches that don't do anything to work on themselves. And it all starts with the coach. So in the midst of all of the confusion and changing landscape, how does a coach lead themselves? Because you got athletes who are asking questions, or you got recruits who are asking, you got athletes on the team who are asking, you got recruits who are asking, you got parents freaking out. What do you do? So here's a thought. I often use the phrase, I have to be at my best to be the best husband, wife, parent, child, coach, staff person, athlete. How do I be at my best? Where do coaches get vulnerable? I mean, is there a round table of SEC coaches that share their weaknesses and difficulties that they're having with their team? I don't think so. So where does a coach go? Got to have somebody. Got to have something. I don't know. What do you think about where does a coach go right now in the midst of all this? And what do they need to do?
You want me to start, Mike?
Go ahead.
And this is where my mind went to. I think you have to start by surrounding yourself with good people. I think as a head coach, your staff is vitally important in this because one, you have to know how to use that staff. You have to know how to rely on that staff to do different things within your program. However, and I learned this lesson probably the last 10 years of my career as a head coach. The entire reason I went after Mike Simpson, Mike didn't have to come to Columbia, South Carolina to be a coach on an SEC staff. He was a head coach, a very established head coach, and had built a great program. But what I needed from Mike was I needed someone who, when things were spinning out of control, or when I didn't know what decision to make, or when I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was, I knew I could call Mike Simpson into my office. I could shut the door and go, Mike, I don't know what to do here. I need your help. What would you do? And I had a wealth of knowledge on my staff that I could turn to in a time where I wasn't sure what the answer was. And so to your point, Jeff, are there SEC coaches talking about weaknesses? No, and there won't be. I just being transparent, there won't be. But inside my staff, I knew with Mike Simpson, with Mark Bernardino, I could bounce every idea. I could bounce every thought, every concern, every confusion that I had going on off of those guys. And I was going to get the absolute best wisdom I could get that they would put forward. And so I think my first stepping point there is surround yourself with people that you can trust with that.
It's really good. It's really good. What would you add to that, Mike?
Well, first, thanks. I think the other piece of it, and I've done this since I first got to Gardner Webb and all the way through, I have a group of people that I meet with every week. They are there for accountability, they're there for mentorship, and they are not swim coaches. Some of them, I've had a group that was all head coaches. We met once a week for lunch. Some of them have gone on to be really, really successful D1 coaches. But we could sit around the table and talk about issues like recruiting, for example. None of them ever understood my sport. They never did. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I could talk about, hey, I went to a meet and I watched this guy, this college coach, cheat his butt off. And here's what happened. And I'm just curious, what would you guys have done in this situation? Would you let it go? Would you approach him? What would you do? And it was invaluable. And I've continued that here. I have a group of coaches and people outside in the Auburn community that are a part of a group. I'm there every Tuesday morning, man. I don't miss unless I have to. The other thing that I think is invaluable is having a group of coaches, whether it's formal or informal. And I think formal is better because when you have an informal group, you tend to not follow through. But and I'll put a plug in for the CSEAA. They have a mentorship program, and
yeah,
years ago I decided to sign up for it, and they try to plug people and put people together in a group, and I've developed friendships, but more importantly, it's helped remind us we can counsel each other, we can help each other. And in the midst of all of this, I think you need people that will listen to your specific issue right now as a coach, whether you're a head coach, whether you're an assistant, whether you're mid-major D2, somebody that understands the job that you're in and can help you, in some cases, just help remind you of the one thing that you've kind of forgot. You're in the middle of the forest and you can't see the trees, and you just need somebody to be able to go, hey, have you thought about this? And you're like, oh man, how did I not remember that?
Yeah.
I think that's invaluable.
Maybe that goes to that self-awareness piece of that Canadian study, both for coach and athlete, as we've said. Am I aware that I have blind spots?
Yeah.
I need people to speak into my world, and the mentorship program with CSCAA that I connect with, and I actually talked to Sam, the executive director, the other day about this call, and she very much encouraged. Thanks for including CSCAA in this conversation, because they're working on so many conversations about the viability of Olympic sports in the NCAA. So they're working at it from that side, doing a great job. They put out some great information. If you've not gotten those PDFs, reach out to them. They will get them to you. Great talking points, great encouragement. But the mentorship program, are you in a group where you can share and get that input? That's an excellent way to do it if you're not going to form it on your own. And it really can't be within the staff, right? I mean, it could include a staff person, but you really want to get outside of your own staff.
Yeah, you want to get out of the box. You really do.
Because we live in that.
Yeah. The other piece I would add is time with you, Jeff. And at times you've asked me questions that I literally have sat there and gone, I don't have an answer to that. I've never thought about that. But I look back now, and those times were invaluable because you made me think. And a lot of times you made me kind of stop in my tracks and go, I've never really thought about it that way. And again, just like a group of coaches can do that, someone like you as a leadership coach is also, I think, invaluable, particularly in today's world where you need somebody that can speak truth. You need somebody that can ask the right questions and help you navigate, and also just to remember what are the most important things. Because again, I think you can get so lost in, oh my gosh, things look so bad, the future looks awful. Am I going to have a job? Are we going to have a program? Are we going to have a sport? What, and somebody to kind of help you slow down and think through things, I think is also invaluable.
Yeah, taking that step back is huge.
I agree with that, Jeff. I think what Mike was just talking about allows that coach to, one, become more self-aware, but it allows them to be centered enough and anchored enough to address the constant movement going on around them, the questions from the athletes, the questions from the parents, the questions from other coaches, the questions from administrators. If they are not in tune with almost a bigger picture, like we've talked about, and they don't know the questions to ask, I think that's where conversations with you come into play. I know I'm with Mike 100% on this. I feel like I learned a lot about myself just through sitting down through our sessions and stuff like that, and I learned a lot about why I operate the way I do.
Yeah, and that goes right to the point. How a coach shows up, especially now, it's always been this way, but how a coach shows up communicates to the team. Here's a simple example of, if there's an athlete that is consistently late to practice, I don't want to know why they're late. I want to ask them two things. What do you have to do differently to not be late? And there's that ownership. I own this. And the second is, what's this communicating to your team? Well, guess what, coach? If you are so unsettled that you're not showing up consistently, what's that communicating to your team? And it could be as a great example. There was a coach that I worked with whose their default, almost their comfort zone, was anger. They got angry. It just, when a swimmer didn't do what they needed to do in a set, anger, it was like they just kept coming to anger in all these. And once we became aware of that, they're like, yeah, this isn't working, is it? And, a question I love to ask is, how's that working for you? It's not working. And so we replace that behavior. What are the triggers for you as a coach? And what are the questions you got to ask administrators right now? Oh, there's an interesting question. What would you two say to coaches? What do you have to ask your administrators right now?
Mike, you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, thinking back to the administrators that I worked with, and their administrators are very different. I've worked for some outstanding ones. You guys both know Chance Miller, who's just taken the athletic director's job at Coastal Carolina. Outstanding administrators, and I've worked for some that were not at that level. I think the first and foremost for me was I had to make them aware of the environment in which I was working. And I think they need to know what's going on around that coach's life, their world inside the program, that the things that they're having to deal with. And then with that, expressing to that administrator, okay, knowing now the questions I'm getting, the feedback I'm getting, the concerns that I'm getting, what is our overall plan kind of moving forward? Is there a plan? What does it look like? How can I then provide this information to my athletes and my parents so that there's a level of comfort there that they know we're addressing this and that we have a plan moving forward. And I think that forces two things. It forces, one, the administrators to have a plan, and two, to be able to learn how to verbally communicate that to not only the swimming coaches, but to other coaches as well.
You know, to that, while Mike thinks, part of me is then saying, oh, well, then I get, as a coach, I get to say to an athlete, I get to say to my staff, I get to say to a parent of a recruit or a parent of a present athlete or to a recruit, I get to say, listen, here's what we know. Ask me anything you want. I may look at you and say, we don't know. And are you okay with that, saying that? There's a lot of coaches that aren't okay with saying that. I don't know. Well, here's what I do know, which to me circles back, I think, to I'm leading me. I'm leading the narrative, if you will. I mean, the NCAA is not giving us a narrative. They're just almost feels like they're sitting back, just kind of going, where is it all going to fall? And there's some administration that's not given a narrative. Well, coach, what's the narrative you want to press? You get to be in charge of that. Hey, am I connecting those dots correctly?
Yeah.
What does an administrator, or what does a coach ask an administrator, Mike?
Well, hopefully, and I've heard this for years, and I think some people have done a good job of this and some have kind of ignored it. And if you haven't, good luck now. And that is teaching your administration the value of your program and the value of the individuals within your program. You know, one thing at Gardner-Webb that we prided ourselves on is we led the nation in GPA. We did it 7 times between the men and the women. And so the school saw great value in our program. Yes, we were successful in the pool, but, you know, administrators and people in the university, obviously the academic side of things is huge for them. And so, yeah, I wanted to make sure that they saw that piece of it, and that was important to us, which then led back to recruiting kids that were good athletes, but also good students. So you didn't have to worry about that piece, and you didn't have to have meetings with kids and say, when are you going to start studying? You know, that kind of thing. So I think the value of your program hopefully has been communicated with your administration so that they understand your piece of the pie from the overall perspective. And then, you know, outside of that, I agree with McGee. I think what he said was really, really important. And then to be able to, hopefully you have a relationship with your administration so that when you sit down now, there's already the relationship. And when you start talking through your value to the university, your value to the athletic department, then they already see it. But to be able to have open discussions about the ever-changing world and every piece of it, because as has already been said, there are things that right now nobody can answer. Nobody. You know, where does Title IX fit in? And this 30 and 30, what does that mean? Does that mean giving 30 full rides, or do you have to? And I mean, there's so many moving pieces, and nobody really has answers to those yet. And like you said earlier, one of the things that I've seen already is, you know, and rightfully so, I guess, parents are kind of panicky, like, well,
Yeah.
you know, my kid's an incoming freshman, and we're now looking at not just the transition of being a freshman in college and moving away from home and not eating mom's cooking anymore, but now we're going to throw in this into the mix. Whoo! And you can just see it. Their hair's on fire, like, oh my gosh. And it's like, okay. I actually had this conversation 2 weeks ago. I was at a meet recruiting, and a couple parents came up and bombarded me with that one. And it's like, you know, my advice is all you can do and all your kid can do right now is do their thing and be coachable, work with the coaches, come in, work hard, focus on the things that you can focus on and the things you can control. And the things that are out of your control right now, like leave that part alone, because you can't do anything about that right now. You can control you in your lane. That part you can control.
So that's a great topic. Coaches say to their athletes all the time, hey, control the controllables. Okay, coach, let's flip it around. Control the controllables. And it at least starts with you as the person of the coach. Got to lead me first before I can hope to lead others. But are you working on this? I mean, the coaching profession is brutal. It's hard on relationships. It's hard on marriages. It's hard on health, physical health. It's hard in so many ways. And yet a lot of people choose it, live in it, because there's a great part of coaching. But if I'm not at my best, what's that going to mean? I think about four main things that I think we control as individuals. We control our words, we control our actions, we control our attitude, and we control our relationships, who we choose to hang out with, who we choose to develop life with. Yes, I got to work with some people, be they staff, administrators, et cetera, because of my job. But I still get to choose how I lean into that. These are four key things that a coach has to be consistent with in showing up. How do they do that beyond what we've already talked about? What's the challenge? Maybe that's the question. What are the challenges out there to controlling my attitude, my words, my actions, and those relationships?
Constantly evolving information. I believe. I mean, this is moving at a speed that I've never seen before. 25 years of coaching, things are moving on a daily basis. And so I think when you talk about your words and your actions and your presence as a head coach, one of the biggest challenges in my mind, and I'm not having to live this right now. It's easy for me to say this, but one of the biggest challenges in my mind would be that revolving door that now is college recruiting, NIL, Olympic sports, all these different things. That's a constant evolution of the landscape. I think your words, as best you can convey them to your athletes, are ones that will try to not necessarily give them false hope, but to give them a consistent message that you are doing everything that you can for them in their best interest. You're doing everything that you can to get the parents their information. And then you're doing everything you can, like Mike said, to convey to your administration how important those other two groups are to the university. But I think in my mind, the biggest challenge is you get one piece of information one day, and 24 hours later, it is completely out the window, and it is a 180. It's the opposite direction. That's really hard to process as a coach, and it's hard to plan. It's really hard to plan. There's no such thing as planning with evolving information.
So that awareness again, where does that kind of thing trip me up? Where do I how do I respond to that? Where do I not do well? Where do I do well in the midst of that? And we begin to cycle back to who do I have around me that can help me when the world feels like it's on fire.
Yep.
Well, I got a text the other day, the guy who leads the group on Tuesday morning that I go to every week, and yes, Christian faith is a huge part of my life. And he asked me a specific question: how can I pray for you? And my answer was, one, I want to impact the athletes that I work with each and every day this whole season. And I want to impact the people that I'm surrounded with, the staff, other people on campus, other people in the community. Those two things are huge for me, so that in the midst of bad news, administrator walks in and says, throws the curveball. I can constantly take a step back and go, okay, I'm about to walk out on the deck in 45 minutes. Those athletes, they still deserve the best that I got. And my attitude going into that practice is no different than it was before I heard that news. It's, I'm here to be impactful. That's
So
my
so I got to know what my goal is. I got to know what my
Yep.
why is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I add a quick story to that, Jeff?
Please.
So along that lines of what Mike just said, and I agree with him 100%. I think coaches have to keep in mind that through all this, these athletes they're taking in everything that you say and do, and that's to Mike's point. When you walk out on the pool deck, they're immediately feeding off of your body language, your words that you're saying. And I'll tell just a quick story. A few years back, we were at our end of year banquet. And at the end of the year, the seniors come up and they do a speech, and it's supposed to be like 2 minutes, and it turns into like an 18-minute speech, and it's a 4-hour banquet, and it's one of those deals. But one of the young ladies was standing up, and she referenced during her speech, she referenced a meeting that we had 4 years earlier. And it was, Mike, you remember Aubrey Higgs, outstanding All-American breaststroker, just a sweet, sweet human being, outstanding student. She referenced a meeting that we had 4 years earlier. And she said, I walked into the office. I was scared. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. She said, I was struggling with training every day. And she said, Coach looked at me and he said, let your faith be bigger than your fear. Now, full transparency, I don't remember saying that. I know I did because I've said it multiple times. I don't remember saying it to her.
Yeah.
In that moment, 4 years prior, a 10-second sentence had shaped her entire 4-year career. And so that I carried that weight with me for a long time, because as a coach, every word, they hang on that. And the things that you don't think they notice, that might change their life, like might change their trajectory of where they're going. It may change how they view a number of things. So the impact that coaches hold in their hand, that can never be taken lightly, because just as much as it can lift people up, it can tear them down as well. So that I carried that weight with me for a very long time. And I hope coaches are aware. I know Mike Simpson is aware. He lives it every day. But I hope coaches are aware of just their presence, what that does to athletes and parents and administrators and people around them.
Yeah. Well, Mike's great at it because he knows how to pause before he talks, unlike you and me.
I don't do that well.
We just kind of go into it. But, self-awareness, right? So, I think about how important is it for coaches to have consistent staff meetings right now, especially. I think it's always been important, but are you on the same page? If the staff's not getting along, the swimmers know it. So again, we're back to relationships. If athletes trust you, they'll perform better. Well, guess what? If athletes know that the coaches are on the same page, they're going to perform better. And yeah, we want them to perform better. Ultimately, we want them to be awesome human beings and leaders because of the sport. But it's the avenue through which it's built, and yet that gets lost. If I'm not winning, is my job in jeopardy? What if my team is at the bottom of my conference, the bottom third? Now what? What happens? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that all three of us have had and are having with coaches. What does that landscape begin to look like? What does a new coach do? You know, new coach at Miami University nearby me. You know, new coaches all over the place. What do they begin to do and live into and ask? So, how would you wrap this up? What's like, if you could boil it down to two or three sentences? Here it is, Coach. I want you to know you're not here. Here's part of mine. You're not in a boat by yourself. And if you feel like that, you're going to feel like that at certain times. There's no doubt. But you find that group. Get into that mentor program with CSCAA. Get into some kind of group around your location. You know, if you're a person of faith, get in a group with your church. If you know, what is it? But have those people because your family need you to have it, and your athletes need you to have it, and your staff needs you to have it. How would you guys summarize what you want to say?
I think in addition to that, and we've already talked about it, but I think focusing on what we as coaches can control and not focusing on the things that we have no control over whatsoever. I think swim coaches as an organization need to be involved, more involved. I think we need to think outside of the box in order to still be relevant in today's landscape. I think we have some people in place to do that, but there are a lot of things that are just out of our control. They just are. And focusing on the controllables, you can have peace of mind when you're just concerning yourself with those things. And I think the other thing is constantly reminding yourself of what's important. If you can't figure it out, I'm a people person. And to me, that's the most important piece is the people that I work with and the kids that I get an opportunity to coach. It's an honor. It's a privilege every day. And I value that. And that's most important. So if I don't walk out on the deck, if I'm not in my office and my door's not open, I swam for two guys in college whose door was not open, didn't want me to come talk to them about anything, ever. So I didn't, because I was not welcome to do that. And I vowed when I went into college coaching that I would not be that way. So the door needs to always be open because these guys need to come in. And sometimes it's just to come in and hang out and sit on the couch. But sometimes it's a valuable conversation because they have a question that's been hanging over their head for a day or a week or a month, and to be able to talk through those things is huge.
Well, and while McGee's thinking, you don't have to, as a coach, you don't have to fix everything that walks into your door. Just listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. And McGee's laughing because we worked on that a lot. And some people are fixers. And it's like, no, you don't have to fix another person's feelings.
Right.
They're just feelings. They're important. But what is it about you as a coach that feels like you need to do that? You don't have to fix their attitude because it doesn't belong to you. And there is an accountability that goes along with the choices, and that's part of coaching 18 to 22-year-olds. But yeah, just just being present, which is a whole nother topic. Can you be present? You know, like you said, Mike, you had this news 45 minutes before practice on deck. Are you still thinking about that, or are you present? And that's a difficult thing for a leader to do when everything's spinning. Am I present, or am I thinking about what just happened, or am I thinking about what's next?
Yeah.
Be here.
And I think along with that, and years ago, I heard the suggestion, hey, get to practice 10 or 15 minutes early and just hang out.
Yeah.
Don't have an agenda. Just go hang out. Somebody's going to walk up to you and say, hey, guess what? I got an A on my calculus test, and it's huge to them. And they want to talk. They just want to tell you. Same thing after practice, just literally sitting there and hanging out. And some people are just like, they're out the door, get me out of here. I'm starving, I got stuff to do, or I just want to get out of here. But just being present before and after for those moments when kids just want to say something or hang out or have a question.
That, Mike, that used to be my favorite thing about coaching, the 15 minutes before practice. I still say that those 15 minutes kept me young, because when you get to hang out with 18 to 22-year-olds, even when you're cutting up, and some of those kids, they're so brilliant, they're so funny, they make the coaching side so fun. But to your point, Jeff, you're right. What I learned through working with you was, one of my things is I have to be bigger than the problem. Like that's my thing for my athletes, is when they have a problem, my job as the coach is to help them through it. Like, I got to have an answer. And that was a struggle for a very long time. And so you asked me, what would you summarize and tell a coach? I would say that based on what I'm seeing, you're not alone in this. Like, I think coaches are kind of interpreting this uncertainty as a weakness, because I can't figure out what to do. I can't figure out, and I'm going to tell you right now, nobody knows what to do. And if somebody tells you they do know what to do, how about this? I can tell you, I'm on the outside in now. They're lying. They don't. Nobody knows what to do.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
In order for them, the first step you got to make is to know that, look, this is not an individual thing for me. This is not a negative in my life. This is not a weakness that I'm conveying. This is a problem for everyone, top to bottom. It can be the coach with the most resources, just winning national titles, or it can be the coach that's struggling to get by to having to fundraise. Nobody knows how to navigate this right now. And so that first and foremost, that realization and that understanding that you guys you're all in this boat together. And it might serve you well to talk around a little bit, not just to people inside the sport, but outside the sport, in terms of how we can walk through this and navigate this issue together. I think is a big thing.
Yeah. So huge. When everything is spinning, when nothing is certain, how do I respond to that? What does that do to me? But how do I move forward? How do I take steps? And the only thing I can do is lead me and control what I can control. I had a coach come up to me at the CSCA meetings in May in Indianapolis, and pulled me aside and said, I need to get better. So let's work together. Dang, I'll take that motivation any day. I need to get better. Yeah. Okay. Let's do it. And it's going great. Find somebody who will make you better. Find somebody who will come alongside, because we need to steady the ship as much as possible. And every time somebody throws a bucket of water in our boat or knocks a hole in the side of it, we can be steady at the helm. But it's got to start with you as the coach. So, Mike, enjoy what looks like a beautiful day in Auburn.
It's a beautiful day.
And
Always a beautiful day on the plains, right, Mike?
Right.
I know you just got done with practice, so or a practice, so that's awesome. McGee, Debbie is swirling around Columbia,
See the trees starting to bend a little bit in the background.
be safe. You're gonna get some more rain. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate you guys so much, and we'll do it again sometime as we learn more and more, or learn more about what we don't know.
Yeah. Thanks,
Awesome.
Jeff.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.